Well, joining me now, Democratic Congressman Jim Himes, member of the Intelligence Committee. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for waiting through our live event with Hillary Clinton and Tom Harkin. I'm sure you didn't mind listening to your fellow Democrats there.
No worry, Alex. I'll always cede to the butter cow and the deep-fried Oreos.
You're a better man than I, because I'm like, no. Anyway, let's get to what I want to talk about here with House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy, who claimed this week that there is still a real possibility the opposition could get enough Democratic votes to override President Obama's veto. How close do you see it right now?
Alex, I think it remains very unlikely that Congress will override a veto. In the United States Senate, you've had one Democratic senator oppose the deal. In the House, you've had 10. For an override in the Senate, I think you need something like 18 or 19 Democratic senators to join in, and in the House, you'd need something like 45. So you're still a very long way, I think, from the numbers that would suggest that you would override a veto. And as time passes, now, by the way, there's a lot could happen in the next 30 or so days. To move this one way or the other. But as people have gotten familiar with this deal, I think, nobody's thrilled with the deal, as no one is ever thrilled by any international agreement. People are coming to understand that saying no to this deal is just a very, very risky proposition.
Okay, but in terms of, there's a lot of time here that things can happen. Even beyond that, look, by the time the deal is finalized, the president's days in office will be numbered. Do you expect Iran to fully comply when the next American president might try, hey, this deal is off, and launch some sort of a new campaign against Iran?
Well, look, I think, the Republicans are all saying that if they become president, they will not abide by the agreement. I think that's utter fantasy. I think they need to say it because they're running for president. But the idea, let's imagine that, 2 years from now, Iran is in full compliance, which, is not guaranteed. I happen to believe is the more likely course, but is not guaranteed. They're in full compliance. You've got all sorts of European and Chinese and American companies doing business, and all of a sudden a brand new president is going to say 2 years after an agreement, sorry, the game is off. The United States is going to impose sanctions while Iran has a history of having complied. I think the probability of that is pretty close to zero, whatever they may say.
Okay, what about Democrats who oppose the deal? Are they going to face the wrath of the party, the wrath of the White House when they're up for re-election next year? And also comes to mind is Senator Chuck Schumer, who's expected to take the helm of the Democratic Party in the Senate. I mean, could the fact that he's come out in opposition of the deal, could that be a problem for him?
We've been out of Washington, at least on the House side, for a couple of weeks. But I will tell you this. This is one of those votes that people understand, is the classic vote of conscience, where you hope that people pull politics out of it. Now, that's not necessarily what's happening, but, I think people understand that this is a matter that touches on huge strategic national security issues. And by the way, it's not a no-brainer. Anybody who says one way or the other that it is a no-brainer, you should just stop listening to them at that point in time, because it's a very, very difficult calculation with lots of risks both ways. And truth be told, I think that the White House and the leadership, certainly on the Democratic side, understands that and are treating this issue accordingly. Look, remember, it was not that long ago that we were assured that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and if people didn't do the right thing and go in and authorize military action in Iraq, all hell would break loose. Obviously, that turned out not to be the case. The experience turned out to be bad, and I think that an awful lot of people, not everybody, an awful lot of people in Washington have learned that on these issues, you handle them with care. Okay.
I want to ask you about the claims that ISIS used chemical weapons, potentially mustard gas, in an attack on Kurdish forces this week. Have you seen, sir, any intelligence confirming this report, and would that change anything for U.S. strategy?
I have not seen any such evidence. This event occurred after the House left on recess, so I've been following it largely in the news. Look, from my standpoint, if it were true, and there is evidence to suggest that it is, although it's not conclusive, it would not surprise me one iota. ISIS has shown over the years that they will do literally anything against their opponents and to attract attention and to instill fear. So, gosh, we're going to learn yet again that this is an appalling group of people that we need to be very focused with our allies in the region in eliminating.
Okay. I do want to ask you about the Connecticut State Supreme Court ruling that the death penalty there is unconstitutional. That's taken 11 convicts from death row. A bit earlier, I spoke with Cynthia Hawk-Wren. She's the sister of Jennifer Hawk-Pettit, who was tragically killed about 8 years ago in that just heinous crime in the state of Connecticut. She was murdered. Her 2 daughters were murdered. Her husband beaten up and left for dead, but he survived. I want you to listen to what she told me when I asked her how she felt about the fact that these 2 men were no longer on death row.
Out, beat my brother-in-law repeatedly in the head with a bat while holding a gun to him, hoping that he would die. They raped my sister and my 11-year-old niece. They strangled my sister and doused the girls with gasoline and light them on fire while they're still alive as the police are waiting outside. That's extremely cruel and unusual. And no, let's see, living in prison with computers, televisions, books, educational classes, workout facilities, 3 meals a day, heat, air, medical, dental, eye care, and all their needs being met doesn't bring me solace or satisfaction of any kind. I wish it did.
You know, when she told me that earlier, I couldn't say anything more with her interview. I was done. What do you say to someone who's suffering like that and who points out that these are the conditions that these two murdering thugs are going to live under?
Yeah, well, you know, of course, when you're talking to the survivors, the family members of victims of these heinous crimes, you've got to give them an awful lot of deference. I mean, you know, heaven forbid that most of us would ever have to go through something like what those family members did. So I think you accept their points of view with great humility. I mean, look, the reality is that around this country, people who find themselves on death row have done things that literally make your blood boil. And you know, this is why we have a conversation, and have had an interesting conversation in Connecticut. Remember, this legislature voted to eliminate the death penalty some time ago. The Supreme Court decision just says that for those 11 people who are on death row today, they will not be executed. So Connecticut has, over the years, despite the horror of the Cheshire situation, joined a variety of other states in saying, hey, this is a flawed practice. And, you know, through the legislature, the people of Connecticut spoke and said, we're not going to do it anymore. So, again, and by the way, this reflects a personal journey of my own. I understand the rage and the desire for retribution that people have. I feel it. If it happened to my family member, I'd probably want to kill the assailant myself. But, of course, we are a society of laws, and we are migrating, I think, to what most people would consider a slightly more humane and less arbitrary penal code, and probably over time likely to use the death penalty in this country a lot less than we did in the past.
All right. Well, as always, good to talk with you, Representative Jim Himes. Thanks so much.
Thank you.